The Royal Gorge War by Brianna Creo.
Welcome to the Royal Gorge. My name is Jennifer and I'm going to be your tour guide. Many people do not know what had happened before the Royal Gorge had made it to be a tourist site. There's many things that people don't know about what happened here at the Royal Gorge. The Royal Gorge is a gorge that is dug down about 1,053 miles deep from the Arkansas River for years. This is a place where the Royal Gorge War had happened. On April 19, 1878, this is when the Royal Gorge War was being fought. It had lasted for 2 years. This was an interesting war that not many people know about. The Royal Gorge was a tough war. This was fought between two railroads. The two railroad companies that were fighting were called Santa Fe Railroad Company and the Rio Grande Railroad Company. The reason that they were fighting was because they had heard that there was miners that were working and mining much of valuable stuff at the bottom of the gorge in the Arkansas River, and in the mountains they had wanted to get wealthy. The things that the miners had found was very valuable, and they both had wanted to make a railroad there from the mountains to carry the ore that the miners had found. The ore that the miners had found was silver and lead from the mountains and through the river. This was a war that railroad companies had fought for a whole 2 years. After they both had kept fighting for a long time, they had gotten tired of fighting. So what they did was that each company had hired a whole other crew and a commander to win. The Santa Fe Railroad had hired Marshal Bat Masterson. He was a legendary gunfighter and his Kansas posse to protect their crew and the materials they had carried. The Rio Grande Railroad Company had hired a much more beneficial fighting crew. The crew was people they had hired was a crew of 200 men, and it was their posse led by Governor A.C. Hunt. They had exchanged gunfire from the other side of the gorge throughout the whole 2 years that they had fought through. They had a deal that the winner of the war would be able to build their railroad into the mountains. This was for the miners so they could get down and for them to carry the ore down from the mountain and up from the Royal Gorge. Now today, only one of the railroads are working, but only to show you around the Royal Gorge site, for you being the tourist and also for me being the tour guide. This railroad was for the passengers that they can get around in the train cars. This also brought in money because people had to pay to get on it. This has also brought in the money from the ore that they had carried down. This brought in the money because the companies that had made the products with the lead and silver had to pay for it, and whichever railroad company had won the war, they would be the ones who made it with the silver and lead. This war was used for the railroad companies to get money from people and from the miners that had found all silver and lead. So the railroad companies had to bring in their special forces. Since the war was being fought on who was going to get the most money, then they both had to just keep fighting for dear life and for them to just get rich with what they were fighting for. This was when silver was discovered in the upper water of the Arkansas River in the gorge. The railroad that had wanted to be built were called freight trains. A freight train was what carries ore. Throughout this war, the Rio Grande Railroad had eventually won the war that had lasted for 2 years. This had ended up where they had built a freight train and had much wealth they had gotten from the ore, and they had to discontinue it. The person to discover the Royal Gorge was Lieutenant Zebulon Pike and his crew. He had found out where this was and had the first camping trip in the Royal Gorge. To carve the gorge, the Arkansas River had to carve it into solid granite bedrock. The Royal Gorge is about 10 miles long. Its width is 40 to 50 miles. From 3 miles from the Arkansas River, archaeologists had found remains of 100 to 200 billion-year-old fossil stone. Thank you for coming and visiting the Royal Gorge.
That was weird. It felt like we were there.
Yeah, I felt that too, like we were in the war against each other.